Thanks so much for coming out today. I want to thank you for being at this service in particular. Our other services, especially the middle one, has been very full. So thank you for, I think, making space available in that service by coming to this one. And I hope you guys had a great week. I hope you got your deer. I know a lot of you guys are a little distracted about that. Our drummer, Jay Michael, you got to see that, man. He got a deer that I think that buck weighs at least 230 pounds. I mean, its neck is bigger around than most deer's torso. I mean, that thing. And I always tell the young men in the room, I say, let that be a lesson to you. You know what I mean? Like, he got killed, getting distracted, chasing girls. You know what I mean? We don't want that. It's in the rut. You don't want to do that, right? That's what'll happen to you. So anyway, that's why you got to go bow hunting, so that, because all the good ones are gone for gun season. But anyway, I think the rut was early this year. Was it early, Josh? I don't know. It's still on. It's still on, believe me. All right. For men, the rut is like 10 years, 18 to 28. That's like how long that lasts, but then it goes away. It's good. So anyway, what am I saying? Hey, I hope you guys had a great week. I actually did. I've been trying to visit most of our life groups, and it's been such a joy to be able to see these life groups, to see God moving in them, to see the community that's being built. If you don't know what a life group is, it's usually 6 to about 26 people that get together weekly or sometimes monthly to do a Bible study, to have community together. And it's actually been really cool to see the community that's being built at some of these different life groups, and watching the fruit of connection and relationships. Some of them are new. Some of them meet seasonally. Others have been meeting for as long as 15 years. And it's just cool to see the relationships and to see a church that is more than an hour on Sunday morning. It's a movement. It's a family. And I've really enjoyed it. If you want to get involved in one, you can fill out a Get Involved card from the seat back in front of you and drop it off at the welcome desk after the service. But we're in the second week of our series, Relational Vampires. And I really enjoyed this series. I hope you guys have as well. This series is all about learning to love people who suck the life out of you. And this last weekend, we learned you can't deal with the vampires around us until we learn to deal with the vampires inside of us. I challenge you to learn to see your reflection, to walk in the light, and to be reborn in Christ. Because the truth is, apart from Christ, or even as followers of Jesus who forget who we are, it's easy to become a relational vampire. Now, I'm excited about this week. If you missed last week, before we go into this, I want to encourage you to check out the last week's message because it's the foundation for this one if you're watching online. Welcome at the Jasper County Jail Campus. Hello, we love you. And everybody at all 4 of our services here, welcome. And this week, we're going to learn how to deal with vampires around us. And I got a simple message for you today about seeing vampires, defending against them, and overcoming them. And I actually want to teach this message using a story from Jesus' life. It's going to be a verse-by-verse expository passage. We're going to dissect this passage. It was actually written by one of Jesus' close friends. Okay, Jesus had these 12 people that were part of his squad. Remember in MySpace how you had, you could list, the order of how much you liked your friends? Remember how bad that was? You'd be like, oh, my goodness, I fell 2 places with so-and-so. My life is over. That was a horrible thing, really vindictive. But anyway, Jesus has 12 close friends. And Matthew, the guy who wrote our key passage today, was actually one of those 12 close friends. And he followed Jesus around for 3 years, and he actually saw most of Jesus' miracles and speeches, and he writes about this story involving another one of Jesus' squad, this guy named Peter the Apostle. And Peter was one of the early leaders of the church. He was also, for most of his time with Jesus, a total relational vampire. I don't think Peter actually loved God until Jesus rose from the grave. And up until that point, up until their breakfast on the beach where they reconciled, Jesus was sort of a friend of convenience for Peter. I don't know if you ever had one of those people in your life. They have a swimming pool, or, they were held back a grade, so they got a car a little early, or, you hang out with them because they got a cute sister, and you're like, I'm going to deal with you so I can deal with you. You know what I mean? That's the friend of convenience. And I think Peter dealt with Jesus because he was a friend of convenience, because he thinks Jesus is going to be rich, famous, and powerful. And basically, he actually has the assumption that Jesus is going to become president or more. So he follows Jesus around, and he's hoping that he can get famous, and Jesus tours around, and there's all these receiving lines, and Peter just stands next to Jesus. He's like, hey, dude, you want to follow me on Twitter? You want to slide in my Snapchat? Here, check this out, right? And he's always like, Jesus, bro, don't forget to @ me on your story today, all right? @ Apostle Peter, right? Jesus, don't forget, right? I love you, man. Love you, Peter. And Peter doesn't really love Jesus. He just wants to use Jesus to suck the life out of him and get fame for himself. Peter's a total relational vampire that not only Jesus deals with, but eventually delivers from his vampiriness. And the story starts off with Jesus on tour. I don't know if you realize this, but Jesus actually toured around his country, the nation of Israel, with tens of thousands of people following him. It's kind of a big deal to imagine, but this is literally the setting that he's in. When you read these stories, there's literally tens of thousands of people following Jesus. It's kind of mind-blowing, but imagine like a band filling up United Center over and over and over again. That's what Jesus is doing. And he's actually dethroning a corrupt political establishment. In that day, there was this sort of deep state in the nation of Israel that was sort of disenfranchising and sort of just not being good to the nation of Israel. And they do not like that Jesus is exposing their lies. So they attack him on every level, okay? The people love Jesus, but the powers that be do not love Jesus. And all of the pundits of the day on CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, Fox News even, they're just tearing into Jesus all the time, right? You get these news announcers like Don Lemon. He's like, that Jesus is just out of touch. He doesn't understand what I've been through, and he can't relate to us, and he's so bad. And Chris Cuomo's like, Fredo, do you even lift, bro? Okay, don't call me Frito, it's racist, right? And Anderson Cooper's like, I came from nothing. I'm a self-made man. I mean, yes, I came from the Vanderbilt family, but I don't know how I got here. You know what I mean? Just self-made. Thousands of people love Jesus, but every news outlet hates him. He gets censored on YouTube, you know. He gets banned from Twitter because Jack Dorsey's like, if you tell me what to do and like me, I'll do whatever you want, right? He loses millions of followers on the gram because of silent algorithm manipulation. He reaches this point where he's like trying so hard, and people love him, but there's a lot of people who hate him, and he just can't handle it. He feels a little insecure. So he looks at his disciples in Matthew chapter 16, starting at verse 13, and he's like, who do you guys say that, or who do people say that I am? Right? And they tell him, and he says, but wait, who do you say that I am? And I know that some of you right now are like, did you just say Jesus, the Son of God, was insecure? Well, remember, Jesus never sinned, but he was tempted to sin. He is fully God, and he's also fully man. And we see throughout the Bible him tempted with the same proclivities and insecurities and issues that we have, right? I mean, obviously, he is tempted in the wilderness by the devil to sin. He was reluctant to die in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Oh, God, is there any other way? I don't know if I want to do that. Like, that's really hard. Please take this cup of suffering away from me. You know, your will be done, not mine, but I don't know if I really want to do this, God. Like, are you sure? He asked his disciples in John chapter 6, when everybody starts leaving him, he has a rally go really badly, and everybody's leaving, and protesters, and he gets shut down, and everybody's leaving. And he's like, are you guys going to leave me too now? Right? I find it comforting to know that we have a Savior and Creator who actually came into the world he created and lived the life that we lived to demonstrate his understanding and love for us. And in this moment, Jesus is vulnerable with his friends. He's like, guys, I'm discouraged. Like, can you give me some encouragement? I mean, I am down. I'm struggling. Will you pray for me? So Peter tells him, he's like, dude, you're the real deal. You're the Messiah. You are the Son of the living God. And Jesus looks at Peter. He's like, you know what? I tell you the truth. I needed that. Like, that didn't come from you. That came from God. Like, I needed God's voice to remind me of who I am. Thank you, Peter. Thanks, man. I needed that. We have a destiny. God has a calling for our life. That's right. I'm not going to forget that. Because Peter tells Jesus exactly what he needs to hear. And Peter is kind and charismatic in that moment. Last week, I showed you how we can be relational vampires ourselves. This week, I want to show you how to see vampires in others and how to deal with them, which means I've got 2 points on how to see them, and then I have a ton of subpoints in there, guys. It's just what I do. And then I have 2 more points on how to deal with them, okay? That's the structure. 2 points how to see them, 2 points how to deal with them, lots of subpoints. Don't judge me. We're probably going to go over because that's just what we do. All I do is win, though, no matter what, so it's going to be good. But which brings me to my first point on how to see vampires. Relational vampires are seductive, okay? They are. There's something alluring about evil, isn't it? We know that living a life apart from God's plan is typically a great way to have a low level of life satisfaction. Like, we know that statistically, and yet there's something alluring about bad choices. Have you ever noticed that? It's like, this choice is going to ruin my life, but I kind of want to do it. Let me show you some pictures of alluring bad choices. Right here, bad choices, right? My wife loved the Twilight series, and to me, I'm like, but why though? But why? It's a terrible, horrible series. She loved it, right? Count Dracula, it's like, I don't know why you guys were seduced by this man. You could see it. I think there's something seductive about relational vampires in life. Jesus feels a little insecure. Peter tells him what he wants to hear. I think there's a part of us that want that. In fact, the worst relational vampires have this odd appeal that keep us coming back. But here's the truth. Peter doesn't want to affirm Jesus because he loves him or because he wants something for Jesus. Peter is affirming Jesus because he wants something from Jesus. You see, Jesus goes on, he says, from then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders and leading priests and the teachers of religious law. He told them, I'm going to get killed, but on the 3rd day, I'll be raised from the dead. And Peter's like, uh-oh, that's not what I want. I want to get rich and famous, and if you die, you're not going to make me rich and famous. That ain't good. So what does Peter do? He goes into damage control mode. He goes into manipulation mode. It says, but Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Now, first off, let me just talk to you for a moment about how ridiculous this is. The student is reprimanding the teacher. That's weird. Jesus literally was just told by Peter that Peter thinks he's God, right? You're God. And then he begins to reprimand the man he just said was God. Peter doesn't really think he's God. He just thinks he's awesome. He was just flattering him. He begins to reprimand. And then the irony here is just so, heaven forbid, Lord. Jesus is the King of heaven. And Peter is invoking the name of Jesus' kingdom to rebuke him. Heaven forbid, Lord, this will never happen to you. My first little subpoint here is I think relational vampires are seductive so that they can attach strings to your life. They want to, Peter is there and he's manipulating Jesus so that he can gain space in Jesus' life to manipulate him to accomplish the end that he wants. Jesus, this is throughout Scripture we see this. The Bible is a collection of 66 books bound into one larger collection. There's an older collection and a newer collection. And in the new collection or New Testament, there are four. They're called Gospels, but they're four biographies of Jesus' life: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They just kind of talk about Jesus' earthly ministry. And all four of them detail the way that Peter is super manipulative and conniving with the other disciples, right? Jesus will say something profound, and Peter immediately tries to attach strings. He immediately tries to shape the narrative. He immediately tries to curb the conversation for his good. We can see this all the time, like Peter starting an argument, like Jesus will say something, and Peter's like, but Jesus, you like me best, right? I'm the strongest. Jesus, remember the other day when I bench pressed 225, okay? I did 6 reps 6 times. Remember that, Jesus? Tell James about it. Tell James about it, okay? What can James do, right? I'm the best. That's Peter all the time. Anytime there's a conversation, Peter's jockeying for position. Now remember, Jesus has 12 friends. But he's got 3 really close friends, Peter, James, and John. Now, James and John are brothers, and that's kind of hard. When you got, 3 friends, and 2 of them are brothers, they got each other's back. John is actually Jesus' best friend. So Peter is kind of boxed out, okay? He is 3rd best friend, and you remember that show, The Office? There's this character in there named Andy Bernard who is constantly trying to make Dwight Schrute look bad, okay? That's Peter. He's trying to make James and John look bad. You can see it throughout Scripture. He's trying to prove that he's the best. And Peter always can be counted on to disappoint Jesus in his hour of need, right? Jesus is walking to the disciples on the water, and Peter's like, Jesus, I love you so much, man. I have so much faith. You tell me to come out walking on that water, I will, bro. You do it. Watch this, guys. Watch. Oh, I'm drowning, right? During his crucifixion, Jesus looks at him. He's like, you're all going to leave me. And Peter's like, no, I'll never leave you, Jesus, okay? I love you so much. I promise I'll never leave you. I got your back, man. I would die with you. I promise I would. Jesus gets arrested literally that same night. Peter's like, I don't even know who Jesus is, okay? Leave me alone. I don't even follow him. I've never seen him before in my life. Well, why do you have all these, comments underneath all of his posts on Instagram? I don't know, man. That's not me. That's somebody else. That's a Finsta. That's not even me. Somebody did that to me, okay? That's not really who I am, right? That's exactly who he is. Peter does not want Jesus to do great things because he loves him. He wants Jesus to do great things because Peter loves Peter. And that's vampiring. And Jesus is like, well, here's what I'm called to do. I got to die in Jerusalem. Peter's like, but if you do that, I'm not going to get what I want. So he goes into manipulation mode. Because you know what? Vampires are seductive so that they can attach strings. You got to be careful in your life. Because there are people, and you got to ask yourself, are they living for their agenda, or are they living for God's call on my life? Which brings me to my second subpoint. I think relational vampires love to strike when you're vulnerable. Jesus is genuinely down, looking for some affirmation. And Peter comes in there with this answer that Jesus really wants to hear. And the truth is, he's encouraging and it feels good. I think the times that I've been steered most off course by a relational vampire in my life is when I'm most vulnerable. Right? When I'm at my weakest point. And that's a point where I really need to say, who are the voices that I'm listening to right now? I'm always careful when I'm at a low point in my life. Do I want to introduce a new voice into my life? Or do I want to stick with people that I've trusted for a long time? I just think that's a big deal. When we're vulnerable, we need to be careful. This is why it's not wise to go onto Facebook and be feeling down, ... Not a good place to seek for help and counsel. You know what I mean? My daughter, Hermione, oh man, she's super emotionally perceptive. As middle children often are. She's also really good at being a complete savage to her siblings. You know what I mean? Because she knows what they want. She knows what they need. And she's able to stick her finger in that wound and twist. It's just the wrong time. You know what? So my kids are like, why? Right? Even me sometimes. She will say something, and I'm like, and you're going to go to your room, okay? Because that did not make me feel good, and it's about my feelings. That's parenting, okay? No, just kidding. But listen, I don't think being vulnerable is necessarily a bad thing. But who we are vulnerable to really matters. Obviously, expressing your weakness on Facebook, not good. Obviously, opening your heart to unhealthy people or people who are at a place that you don't really aspire to be in, not good, right? But entrusting your hurt and vulnerability to godly wise counsel is a good thing. Just remember, vampires attach strings. They're seductive so they can attach strings. They strike when you're vulnerable. And my second point is relational vampires like to seduce by exploiting your vulnerabilities. I want to make it clear. I don't mind somebody exploiting me. I don't mind. I don't mind serving people. I don't mind serving people for their good, even if I don't get anything out of it. Jesus says, lay down your life for people. Here's what I do mind. If somebody is calling me away from a God-given purpose in my life, I know that in the long run, I'm going to feel super drained because I missed out on a purpose, right? I think that's a big deal. And I think relational vampires, in particular, just like Peter is doing with Jesus, have a tendency to call us away from a God-given purpose. And they bait us with all kinds of different things. Peter used flattery and encouragement with Jesus. Oh, you are the Son of God, Jesus. You're the best. Jesus, I'll never leave you. I love you. Call me to come out on that water, and I will, right? It's flattery, it's encouragement all the time to manipulate the narrative. Some vampires use beauty and enchantment. Some of you guys, some of you ladies, you've experienced this in your life, right? You lost a whole decade with somebody who used beauty and enchantment. Delilah and Samson in the Bible, right? I mean, Delilah uses beauty and enchantment to vampire Samson. It was the worst. Some use strength and weakness. I mean, Hermione, when she's at her worst, can definitely do this. She uses people's strengths and weakness to accomplish her own purpose and call people away from a God-given destiny. Some use guilt. This is probably the most common one. It's the crudest way vampires manipulate. It's the lowest level of manipulation. This is 101. And this is something I do, other people do. We do this in our marriage. Mothers-in-law do this, you get together for a holiday, and you guys never, and you don't even, and if this doesn't happen, I'm going to throw a huge fit, and I'm going to get really mad, and if you don't do it my way, then I'm going to throw a fit until I do get my way, right? I mean, that's the basic. That's how they work. Relational vampires are seductive. They exploit your vulnerabilities, for sure. Now, what you came for is how to deal with relational vampires, and I understand that. I just want to talk about how to recognize them for a moment. I'm going to teach you probably the most important part of the whole series right now. I've got 2 points on this. One of these points is really, really good. The other one is, it's decent. But anyway, let's get into this right now. My first thought when it comes to dealing with relational vampires, you got to know who actually is a relational vampire. I think we have a tendency in our life to really kind of overuse the word vampire or hater. I've noticed a few years ago, I heard an 8-year-old say, I got haters. I'm like, you are 8 years old. You don't have haters. Like, you watch Barney. Like, this is ridiculous. You don't even know are you serious right now? In my life, I have a tendency to feel like everybody's out to get me. I don't know if you feel that way, but sometimes I feel like everybody's life training. Life is so unsafe. I mean, I live at the safest time in human history, in one of the safest countries in human history, but I feel like, oh man, crime's so high. I got to watch my stuff, lock my car, whatever, drop them keys, I got to watch out, right? That's not true. It's ridiculous. I live in fear sometimes. I live in fear of people taking I live in fear of being reprimanded. I live in fear of messing up. I live in fear of disappointing people. And you know what? I am not that much of a people pleaser, but recently I've noticed I've been struggling with that a little bit more. I've been noticed a lot of times I've been losing sleep, especially recently. I've been living in fear of upsetting people. Have you ever done that? When you start living that situation, of course you're going to feel drained, right? I've been kind of just ruminating at night. Even last night, I was ruminating on worrying about disappointing people in my life and having even nightmares about this. And I feel drained. I don't want to hear people say oh yeah, that Pastor John, that wasn't his best sermon. Oh, that Pastor John didn't make time for me when I needed him. That Pastor John, he's not that personable. He's too intense. That Pastor John is calculating. That Pastor John, he doesn't let the right songs get played. I want more elevation. I need more cowbell. That Pastor John, is he really doing discipleship? We got someone, that Pastor John, is he really doing outreach? Is all he care about is discipleship, right? And listen, sometimes I've started to let these things get to me. I've let it start to suck the life out of me. I've had church friends say to me, well, you should really do this. Or you're not really doing that. Or this is funny. Last week, 2 weeks ago, on 2 consecutive nights, one night I had someone say, you talk too negatively about your wife. And then the very next night, I had someone say, you talk too positively about your wife, right? You set a standard with her that I can't reach, just too much. I've had people say, you should preach more expository messages. I've had people then say, you need to do more topical messages. I've had one person in my career say, you need to do a message about my deadbeat husband. And I was like, but you need to get counseling. You know what I mean? Let me help you. I've had another person, true story, once say, you need to do a topical series on my gold-digging wife. And I was like, also, problems, right? They were married to each other. No, just kidding, they weren't. But anyway, listen, here's the thing. If you said any of these things to me, I have no right to be upset. And I'm genuinely at my best. When I'm at my best, I'm not. I'm thankful for the feedback. I crave feedback and improvement opportunities. It's really important to make this church a better place. I want to know. Because if I could do it better and I'm not, it's because I don't know that I'm not, right? That's not a bad thing. And listen, here's another thing. You are not responsible for my emotions. right? Like, if you say something to me, I am responsible for my emotions. You are not responsible for my emotions. But the problem, and here's the problem, is when I'm at my worst, I start to project responsibility for my emotions on other people. And you know what happens? Is I feel like everybody's a relational vampire. I wake up in the morning and I think, man, there is a conspiracy theory that everybody woke up in the morning and thought, how can we hurt Pastor John's feelings, right? Well, the truth is, I don't really have that many relational vampires in my life. People don't want my blood. People don't want my life. They're just saying something. And the problem is, I'm bleeding because my skin is so thin that I allow words to hurt me deeply. That's an issue, right? I mean, speech is not violence. We live in a country where free speech is a fundamental human right. And yet oftentimes I allow words to hurt so deeply that I feel cut. And they're not even bad words. They're not hate. It's just disagreement, right? And disagreement is not hate. There's a difference between those two things. I think there are a lot of people that we call relational vampires. They don't want to suck the life out of you. They're not vampires. They just said something. But our skin is so thin that we let it cut us. And we give our power away. And I want to be clear, that's what we're doing in those situations. We feel like, oh, they came and they took our power away. No. We gave it away. I give it away. I give it away to people all the time, right? And whose fault is that? My fault. That's what I do. You know, I heard a pastor say, Bob Merritt, Eagle Brook Church, great pastor. I heard him say the other day, at the average funeral, only 10 people cry. 10 people will cry. They're moved to tears by a person's life, on average. And he said the biggest determiner of a graveside service attendance, it's the weather, right? And what I found myself doing is bleeding and crying and losing sleep over people who probably won't be at my graveside service if it's raining, and people who won't be moved to tears at my funeral. And let's be honest, I'm crying over people who probably won't even be at my funeral. We're crying and bleeding for people who don't want our tears. They don't want our life. They don't want our blood. They just said something, and they're not actually vampires. We just need to recategorize the way that we think about them in our life. I think this is a huge problem. It would be unhealthy for both me and the people that I'm thinking about if I made all my life about them. If I said, you define me. We don't want that. Here's a simple truth. I think that some people are not relational vampires. They don't want my blood. I'm just bleeding for them, and I have a thin-skin problem. You know what? I don't think that this is just a John Hill issue. I think this is a rampant issue in America culturally today. I think we have a huge issue with so many people who have classified disagreement and hate as the same thing, and yet there is a huge difference between those two things. Somebody doesn't hate you because they disagree with you, right? Somebody just disagrees with you, and that shouldn't make us bleed. That shouldn't make us, I got haters. No. You got somebody in your life who disagrees with you. Let's pretend that this circle represents people that I really want to make happy in my life, right? People who really matter to me. People who, if I don't please, all the people inside of this circle, if I don't please them, then I feel like it's life draining, right? If somebody in this circle says to me, hey, you failed, then I feel like, man, I'm a failure, right? This is the circle of people whose voices I really, really listen to. And here's the problem. For me in my life, at least, I've noticed that I think I've allowed too many people to be in this circle. And I think on the surface level, it's like, oh man, I really hope that I'm in somebody's circle. Well, do you really hope that? Do you want your words to mean so much to them that if you say something, it's going to crush them, right? Do you really want that? I think one of the big problems we have in life is that we have no boundaries with this circle. We basically allow everybody in our life to be in this circle. And when that happens, if you don't please one person in your life, it's the end of the world. It's a big problem. And for me, I put too many people in the circle this week. I was listing out people that I put in the circle. I'm just going to share with you, right? One of the groups of people in the circle are college friends. We knew each other when we were pimply-faced freshmen and launching, containers of pudding across campus with a 3-man water balloon launcher. Like, I gotta make it to the reunion. I gotta make it to homecoming. I gotta make sure I have a perfect sarcastic joke for our private Facebook page that's gonna make them laugh and let them know that I still got it and I'm still funny and I'm still one of the guys. I gotta make sure I make it to his second wedding and his third wedding and his fourth wedding. Get it together for real though, right? I gotta please him. What about everybody at church? Got to please them, right? I don't want to let them down. I want to make sure I'm a good enough pastor. What about people not in church yet? I got to make sure, I have a good face on and that I'm nice. I don't want to disappoint people. I got to make sure that I use cruise control when I'm driving the left lane so I don't oscillate speed from 40 to 70 to 40 to, I got to make sure, I got the sticker on the back of my truck. I got to please them and everybody not in church. What about people on social media?
Oh, I got to please them. Demont unofficial and original. Demont official. Demont Wheatfield happenings. Hebron chatter. I better make sure that I'm on there, that I'm engaged, that I'm making people happy. Because if I let somebody down, well, then I'm bad and whatever, and I'll feel terrible and I'll bleed all over for them. What about people watching online? What about trolls? I got to feed the trolls. They're hungry. I got to make sure I reach them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want them to be upset with me. I got to make sure to please them. And if somebody does say something, oh man, I'm up all night thinking about that 1-star review that we got on Squarespace, because everybody uses that all the time, right? I mean, I just feel terrible and horrible and my life is over and all this stuff. And then you know what's ironic is in the same circle that I put trolls online, I also have my wife, my kids, and my family. That's messed up. That's messed up. And when this circle is my circle, of course I'm going to feel drained. Why? Because look. These people, it's not because these people are vampires. It's because I have miscategorized them and misplaced them in my life. Here's the thing. People who are not in the circle, they can't bite me. And I think the big problem, in 1985, back long before the days of Facebook, our circles were pretty small. We knew 50 people. We actually saw regularly like 10 people that we actually talked with. You know what I mean? Like 10 people, that was it. Okay? Now today, I have like 1,900 Facebook friends, right? Like all of them can message me and say, blah, 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 all this stuff and whatever. And the problem is, I at times in my life when I'm unhealthy, put everybody in the circle. Everybody. And we all do this, right? We all do this. One person says one thing and it's like, it's the end of the world. My life is, can you believe this person that I don't know, that I've never talked to, judge me for some vague thing that I said that was probably inappropriate online anyway? It's the worst day in the world. I got haters. Here's the thing. I spent months worrying and bleeding and crying for people who won't even cry at my funeral, right? I mean, and the sad part is I cry for them while I ignore the 6 people in my life who probably will. My parents are probably gone, but my wife, my brother, and my kids, and possibly one of my sisters-in-law, but they don't really like me that much. Maybe Alyssa, you might cry, but we'll see. You know what I mean? That's a problem. That's a big problem. I think we need to know who is actually a vampire and who isn't. So I think there's a lot of us who are bleeding for people. They're not relational vampires. They don't want our blood. Like, they say something, we start bleeding all over, and they're like, what is wrong? But with you, though, I mean, you're bleeding. Like, that shouldn't have, words. That's all I said, right? What happened to sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me, right? I mean, that doesn't exist anymore because speech is violence, apparently. We just put people in our circle, and we miscategorize them. And when you live life with everybody in your circle, it's not going to be a happy place to live. There have been seasons in my life, and I'm ashamed to admit this, but there have been seasons in my life where I care more about what an employee thinks or what an employer thinks or what a church member thinks than what my wife thinks about me. That's a problem. Like, that's a huge misprioritization of people in my life. Or I care more about those people than what my mother thinks about me or what my God thinks about me, right? I mean, that's a big deal. Guys, Jesus is bae. He's before anyone else in our life. And I think for a lot of us, we don't really do that, do we? We put everybody else in our life. We listen to his voice last, right? That's an issue. And of course, we're going to feel drained. That's life draining. The biggest problem with vampires, I think, in the world today is that we call too many people vampires. And we don't have a vampire problem. We have a self-harming, thin-skinned, bleeding problem. That's the big issue. We allow little things I would tell my kids to not care about, I care about. People say all the time, I got haters and takers. Stop. We don't have haters, right? Disagreement is not hate. Disagreement is just disagreement, right? Hate means somebody wants to kill you, right? Jesus actually had people who wanted to kill him. That was hate, right? He eventually did get killed by his actual haters. My wife was out with some non-Christian friends the other day, and this lady said, Christians are less than human. They should be, disenfranchised and whatever. And this was just her opinion. Nice lady that had a 5-year friendship, and this was her statement. And that actually was hateful and bigoted. But here's the problem in her life. She saw Christians as hateful because they disagreed with her. Right? That's fundamentally messed up. It resulted in her saying these extreme, horrible, actual hateful. And I think for so many of us, we feel drained by all these. And that's not just her. I mean, it's people on both ends of, a social spectrum that do this. But we see people who disagree with us as hate, and it's super destructive. It's super destructive. Most people classify people who disagree as hate, and it's not hate. It's not vampiring. It's just we have thin skin. We're cutting ourselves a lot. It's a miserable way to live. And you're the one who has control of this. I just want to challenge you to know who is actually a relational vampire in your life. I mean, who in your life do you classify as a relational vampire that might not be? I think there's some of us, we're like, oh man, I got haters for days. Maybe there's someone in your life you're realizing right now, you know what? I'm giving my power away and I don't have to. How often in a year do you see your mother-in-law? Some of you guys, it's twice. And she, to you, is Count Dracula. It's she's the worst woman. You see her twice a year, right? You know what I mean? Like, you only see her twice a year. Is it really worth allowing her to rob you of your joy and say she shouldn't? The problem, here's the problem. Who's in your circle? This should not be in your circle. The problem is some of us allow people to be in our circle that just shouldn't be. Some of us today, it's like, maybe I need to remove their voice from my circle. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to interact with them. It's just I'm not going to allow their words to define who I am. That way, when somebody says something to me, I can be like, that's inappropriate, but, funny too. You know what I mean? Like, it's like we're in an SNL skit right now, right? Both. Know who is actually a relational vampire. My second point is really simple, and this is the one you actually came for, because this is how to deal with people who actually are relational vampires. It's a good point. It's all-encompassing. It is going to be satisfactory, I think, for you. But my second point is really simple. When it comes to relational vampires in your life, you need to have a plan of attack, okay? If you are actually going to fight a vampire, not that vampires exist, they don't, but if you're going to go fight Count Dracula, you're not going to just send it. You know what I mean? You're not going to it's going to be a good day. I'm just going to send the old V-twin off the big jump. You're going to think about what you're doing. You're going to make a plan, and then you're going to do it, right? I mean, if I was going to fight Count Dracula, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to get some garlic, got to get a Bible, got to get a wood stake or whatever, right? Now I'm going to get some pretty girl. Christy, come here, okay? I want you to go in front of me. You go in front of me. I'm going to go behind you, but it's not because I'm a coward. It's because I want you to go in front of me. I'm going to hide behind this box, and when Dracula come out, I'm going to go like, pa! You know what I mean? Pa! With the wood stake, right in the heart. Get him, right? It's like a Richard Simmons attack, but much more aggressive. You know what I mean? Like, not like pa, but like, I'm a man, right? Okay? I'm going to get him. You got to have a plan of attack. We make a plan of attack for a vacation. We make a plan of attack for a monthly budget. We make a plan of attack for a football game, but we don't make a plan of attack for our life. That blows my mind. Like, that's, with our lives, what we do is we just send it. We just say, let's hope that we land, right? Let's hope that it's good. You got to make a plan of attack so that when a relational vampire actually comes, you actually know what to do. Vampires want you to do all kinds of things, but unless you know what you want to do, you're just going to fall into their narrative. Peter comes at Jesus, and Peter has a plan of attack. He says, Jesus, I don't want you to do this. Peter knows what Peter wants. Peter tried to get Jesus to do his thing, but only because Jesus had a plan of attack, he was able to avoid doing what Peter wanted him to do. If he didn't, he might have just done what Peter wanted, which would have caused him to miss out on his purpose, and would have left all of us, in a bad way spiritually. And I want you to know, missing out on your purpose, kind of draining. It's draining. This is the biggest reason I think vampires feel draining in the first place, because they distract us and move us away from our God-given purpose. I think one of the biggest reasons we feel drained by people is because we do things for them we didn't really want to do, right? We just didn't think about it. We just didn't really know what we wanted. Have you ever had anyone like that in your life? It's like, what do you want to do? I don't know. Well, you want to do this? Nah. You want to do this? Nah. Well, you know what you don't want to do, huh? Apparently. Can you just tell me, but they don't know. They never thought. All they know is, I don't feel like doing it, right? I mean, that's how a lot of us go through life. We just do it. I remember once, I spent most of my life in the state of Minnesota, which, good and bad. Good state, bad state. Minnesota has this thing called the State Fair, okay? Minnesota State Fair, second biggest state fair in the country. It's a big deal. And I had a friend of mine, we'll call him a friend of me, asked me if I wanted to go to the state fair. I didn't really think about it. I didn't have a plan of attack for my life. So I said, yeah, I'll go to the state fair. Not even thinking about the fact that I hate crowds, that I hate fair food, that I don't like ice cream, that I don't like noise, that I don't like crowds, that I don't like traffic. I don't really like animals that much. I was like, yeah, let's go to the state. Forgetting the fact that I didn't even like this kid that much. I did not like him that much because no matter how much time I spent with him, he was always unhappy that I didn't spend more time with him. Why did I go to the fair with him? It's because I didn't have a plan of attack, right? I didn't have a plan of attack. I just said, okay, and I had a terrible time. Whose fault was it that I went to the fair? Mine. Was that guy a relational vampire? No. I mean, yeah, he wanted me to go listen to his narrative, but ultimately, it was my fault, because I didn't have a plan of attack. I've learned since then to ask myself before every meeting and conversation one simple question. And this is like John and Kristen Hill's secret sauce to life. We are actually kind of freaks about this. I ask myself a version of this question before I do just about anything. Before I talk with my wife, before I talk with my kids, before I write a message, before I preached this sermon right now, I ask myself this question. Before I have conversations in the lobby, before I talk with anybody, I always ask myself this simple question. And it is so helpful for my life. I ask myself, based on who I want to be when I'm 80 or in eternity, how do I need to act now? Simple little question, right? And if you're 80, just add another 5, 10 years on there, okay? Based on who I want to be when I'm 100, okay? Now we're safe, probably, okay? This is in a Japanese church, so we probably don't have anyone who's 100 in here. But anyway, that was funny to me, but nobody else, maybe a little inappropriate. It's 2019. Take it back. Edit it out, okay? Listen. It's okay because I'm half Japanese. That's why. Listen. Based on who I want to be when I'm 80 or in eternity, how do I need to act now? This one question illuminates decisions for us so clearly. Like, because I spent a little time thinking about who I want to be in eternity, I am able to make decisions in the moment simply by asking this question with ease. Like, it is so helpful. I'm not caught in analysis paralysis in my life. I know what I want. I want to point people to Jesus. I want to lead people to emotional and spiritual health. I want to be a servant to others. I want to say the loving truth, even if it's hard. I want to be kind, gracious, and compassionate. I visualize what that's going to look like in whatever situation I'm walking into in life. And you know what? This makes life a ton better. Decisions in life a ton easier. Do you have a plan of attack for your life? When Peter reprimanded Jesus, he was a real live relational vampire, right? But Jesus had a plan of attack to bring about a desired vision in his life. And he knew immediately that Peter was not leading him to that. He wasn't going to let Peter suck the life out of him by dragging him into that vision that he didn't want to be a part of. And you know what? If Jesus did get bit, it would have been Peter's fault. When someone is draining the life out of you, it's because you are letting them, right? I mean, you can set a loving boundary. Even if it's your spouse, you can say, hey, honey, I don't want to bring that into our bedroom. I don't want to make this decision in our life. Like, I love you, I care about you, we're not doing this. Or, hey, honey, I think we can reallocate our resources in a better direction. And I love you and I care about you. And here's this loving vision that I would like you to be a part of, right? But we can't do it without a plan of attack in our life. I think one of the biggest reasons we feel drained by people in our lives, it's less about people being draining and more about us not knowing what our God-given purpose is in our lives. It's not having a plan of attack. So we do things with others that aren't a part of our purpose. And the problem with that is we're alive, but we're not really living our purpose. And like I said last week, I think this is a huge problem for all people in life. We feel alive, but we're not living our purpose. Or we don't feel alive because we're not really living our purpose, even though we're alive, right? This is a big deal. So many of us struggle with this. So I have a simple challenge in the section. I want you to ask yourself, who do you want to be when you're 80 and in eternity? If you're not a Christian, you can end it at 80. If you are a Christian, you can ask yourself the more important question, who do you want to be in eternity? And listen. I think if you are 16 to 26 years old, this is something I would beg you to do. I think this could be one of the most transformational things you could do. I mean, this is the defining decade of your life. 16 to 26, almost all of the most critical life choices that you're going to make are in that spot. And I think so many of us have such a short vision for our life. We're asking ourselves, what do I want to do? And I think that's a silly question because what you do is not who you're going to be, right? I think all of the decisions that you make with your friends in college and high school and the party scene, all this stuff, who you select for a spouse, the decisions you make that you're not proud of, all of it has to do with a lack of clarity on who you want to be when you're 80 and in eternity, right? I mean, this is such a fundamental question, and I would challenge you, especially if you're young, to say, I'm going to spend a day or two really thinking and praying and talking to people I respect to define, this is what I want when I'm 80, right? When I'm in Oak Grove, I don't want to sit down and have a bunch of regrets about these things that I didn't do or that I did do, right? When I'm sitting there at the end of my life, it's not going to be about how big a bank account is. It's going to be about these relationships that I had. And this is what I want them to be. This is what I want people to say at the funeral. This is who I want in eternity with me. This is such a fundamental exercise that I think illuminates and brings clarity to every area of our life. And I think it allows us to live life in a way that we have so many fewer regrets. And we feel so much less drained. If you want to be a life giver, if you want to be a life bringer to people, spend some time asking yourself, who do I want to be when I'm 80 and in eternity? And how do I need to act now to get there? Please, church, please make a plan of attack. Finally, as we close, I think the biggest reason people become vampires is because essentially we get attached to the wrong purpose. We're looking for life in the wrong things. We allow too many people to become a part of the circle that defines us. We just end up wandering and meandering, alive but not really living. Like my middle child screaming, nobody loves me, everybody leaves me, I'm always forgotten about, nobody cares. When you feel not respected, not influential, and not significant, I want you to ask yourself, who am I looking for life in? What is the biggest voice in the circle that I respect? For so many of us, if we're honest, I think it's silly things. For so many of us, it's literally our Instagram, right? For so many of us, it's these silly, when you think about the voices that matter most to you in life, it's things that don't matter. I want you to ask yourself, are you living for what really matters? What are you looking for life in? Peter comes to Jesus, begins to reprimand him, saying, heaven forbid, Lord, this will never happen to you. And I want you to remember, vampires are seductive. Vampires are alluring. Evil, living a life that it doesn't matter, it is seductive. This is tempting for Jesus. Because think about what Peter's saying. Jesus says, hey, I have to make hard choices. I'm going to do great things, but it's going to require suffering. And Peter says, no, you don't have to suffer in life. You don't have to deprive yourself now for glory in the future. You don't have to save yourself. You don't have to make hard choices. You don't have to do listen, let's just live the easy life together. Let's just get rich and famous together. Let's just build an empire on earth. And that's tempting, isn't it? That is really tempting for all of us. Peter's song, the message that Peter gives to Jesus is so tempting. We all want it. But Jesus knows at the end of the day, that's not going to bring me what I want. It's not a part of my plan of attack. So Jesus says to Peter something that sounds really harsh in English, but in the Greek it's not actually that harsh. He says, Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get away from me, Satan. You're a dangerous trap to me." He looks at Peter and he says, "Listen, don't tempt me. I want that life. I acknowledge that there is something alluring and seductive about that life. It would be really fun to say, let's have fun. Let's squander away the life that God's given to us. Let's forget about an eternal purpose. I want that. I understand." But he says, that's not a part of my plan of attack. That won't satisfy. It's not who I want to be when I'm 80. I don't want to build a great empire of a life now and watch people I don't know squander it away when I'm dying. Jesus wants Paul to see things from God's perspective. What does he end with? He ends with this really profound statement. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view. I get that you want what you want. I understand that you desire that. But you need to remove some of the things that are in your circle. You need to remove them. And you need to put God's perspective in there. You need to see things from a godly point of view. And that's what I kind of want to end this series on. Are you seeing things from a human point of view or from God's? I think that there's a lot of us who are feeling drained in life. Feeling like a lot of the people in our life are relational vampires, because let's be honest, we are living only for this life. And not only are we just living only for this life, but we're living for like the immediate future. That is not a great way to live life. Of course, it's going to be draining because we're alive, but we're not really living. We're not really meeting our potential. We're not really living in the God-given calling that we have. In your marriage, are you living from a human point of view or from a godly one, right? I think it's so easy for us to look at this person and say, you know what, they're draining me, instead of saying, I'm called by God to shepherd, pastor, and lead them. With your children, it's easy to say, oh, you know, everybody doesn't understand. Everybody's taking advantage for them, instead of saying, you know, I want to raise his children to love God, right? With our finances, with our job, with this country and politics, with your body image, possessions, friendship. I think it's easy for us just to get sidetracked, to get focused on this earthly perspective, but that's the wrong question. Who do you want to be when you're 80? Who do you want to be in eternity? I think it's so easy to say everybody's draining me, instead of saying, God, I have the vision to live for their good, for your glory, because I love you and because you first loved me. There's some of us here today that need to wake up. We need to open our eyes. Vampires can be seductive. They can paint a great, tempting, alluring picture. They are seductive. But listen, when they bite you, it is not their fault. It is our fault. We have control. So don't blame them. Stop letting them bite you. Help them see who Jesus is by reminding yourself who Jesus is in your life and what his purpose and what his call and what his commission is for you. As we close, I want to ask you guys to stand. And church, I think we have a lot to digest together. I left discussion questions in your notes, and I just encourage you to spend some time really working through that. You don't have to go through it with somebody necessarily this week. You can. I think that'd be helpful and productive for you, but also you can do it by yourself. You can spend some time really reflecting on your life. Life is too good and too much of a gift, and we live at too good of a time in human history and too wonderful of a country in human history to feel drained by everybody around us. God created you for more. He has promises and purposes and a great calling for your life, and I want our church to wholeheartedly say, we're going to step into this. God, use us. You've called us. There's been too much that has been sacrificed for us to live this life and not be great. Let's pray. Jesus, I thank you for your grace and mercy in our life. You have a great purpose for each of us, and I just pray that as a church, you would open our eyes to your perspective. I pray, Lord, for people who feel drained in this room, that you would give us the courage to take ownership of our responsibility in our life. Give us insight and vision for what your plan is. Help us to make a great plan of attack, individually and corporately, to build your message and your kingdom and your gospel in this world. You're such a good and faithful God, and we acknowledge that, and we love you, and we humbly submit ourselves to you today. In the name of Jesus, all God's people said, amen and amen. You guys, the band is going to lead us in one more song together. Let's sing this together.